All right, our next story is the Beirut story, and it was a tough story to get an angle on because, in short, it's just basically an explosion happening in Lebanon. But and a lot of people sadly passed away and got injured. But I was watching the news and the coverage, and the situation has deteriorated. Obviously, there were protests, then government resigned, and now there is a state of emergency. Pretty much, uh, many countries have offered support. Iran, France, everybody offered support, but the support coming from the West is difficult because of the sanctions against the Lebanese government, because of Hezbollah and all that. So the thing that I noticed in the discussion I watched, which we put the links below in the box, and a couple of places, was that the major question out of this event is largely how did Lebanon get to this point? How did it get to this point? And like there were a lot of this I read online and in this program, a lot of people argue that you can this mismanagement traces its roots back to 1982 and Hezbollah becoming a political force in Lebanon. A lot of people blame constant pressure from Israel and American international community. And a lot of other people, whom I agree with mostly, is they argue that the major issue is the political settlement following the French colonial exit, which basically says that the president has to be a Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker of the parliament has to be a Shia. And this system has led to such a sectarian and such a fragmented country that corruption and all that has run wild and has led to uh, events like this, which is a product of mismanagement, of corruption, of even if, by the way, even if some of the conspiracy theories are true, and some agent from Israel or from Hezbollah or from whoever, Syria, whatever, they caused this explosion in one way or another. I think you cannot deny that it was made possible because of the mismanagement, because of the storage, because of the lack of
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
regulatory
even see why
body.
you would give credit to such a random conspiracy.
No, no, because they are very popular right now. I would say majority of Lebanese people. Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, just because they're popular.
No, they should be mentioned, of course. But even if you do believe in such conspiracy theories, you can't deny that it was made possible because of mismanagement. Not, if there was a proper monitoring system, if there was a, proper, if it was an effective regulatory body, this couldn't have happened. So yeah, that these seems to be the different take. The consequence of the explosion seems to be the continued collapse of Lebanon as a state. But there are all these different arguments of who's responsible. Is it Hezbollah, Israel, the situation? I don't know, where do you land on the whole thing? What was your take?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's such an unfortunate event that, in a way, I mean, it makes sense if there's such wide mismanagement of the economy. I mean, Lebanon was having strikes over the economy. There were protests going on around the economy. So it makes complete sense that this mismanagement has spread to all kinds of different areas of society, and then such dangerous, really, products and material were left in a warehouse for years and years and years without anybody taking proper accountability. So it's just another one of those such unfortunate incidents that then you're like, wow, it makes sense. It apparently woke up some Iraqi officials. I read the story where they started going around, and I mean, pretty much surveying places where they realized that shit, something similar could happen. So they've gone around to clean up some warehouses and other places where dangerous material could have been stockpiled. But yeah, and then the blame, I think it lands on every single level. You start with the local governments, you go up to the national government of Lebanon, and then of course you place it into the world context and the positions that it's been put in, the economic situation there. So I think the blame goes really everywhere, but of course with the officials in Lebanon, because I mean, no matter how much trouble you're having from the outside world, I mean, there's no government telling you, okay, don't clear this up from the warehouses and leave this here. So you can't. So I think the Lebanese government has to take a lot of the blame when it comes to this incident.
Um, Look, sure, I no, I agree to a point because there was a program. I think I can't remember if it was Channel 4 or BBC, but they were covering the explosion within it was next few days of it, right? And they had this politician from Lebanon, and then they had this journalist activist of Lebanese, I think, origins, um, and they were discussing the issue. And she was saying that all the blame lies with the Lebanese government, with the corrupt officials, with the powerful elite, and then the politician, the Lebanese politician, were saying, okay, yeah, sure, there's some of the blame lays with the politicians and all that, but the people also are very much to blame because the people have also, whenever they benefited from this sectarian system, that when Shias get something over Sunnis, they celebrate. When Sunnis get something from Shias, they celebrate. So they have enabled this corrupt system. It's not like this corrupt system. Lebanon, according to even international bodies, they had they had free elections. According to even international bodies, they had free elections. So I don't think you can just blame a political class and the poor people. I'm sorry, but the people were also very much involved in electing those politicians.
I mean, I don't want to speak specifically of the Lebanese context, but any context in general, because I wouldn't know that much about their politics. Everywhere, I mean, everywhere, I think you can put not that much blame on people, given the information that is shared with them at all times, given the options, given the circumstance that they're in. So maybe a little victory for them, they're like, forget about the rest. I mean, Lebanon is a tiny country with just 4 or 5 million people, but poverty has reached sky high levels. That's why there were protests this year about the economy. So I mean, I think putting the blame on the public, I'm always wary of this, and I always, based on the things that come out of media, the things that people hear in life, I'm just not surprised when people make such decisions anywhere in the world. And I think with something like this, especially, most of the blame, I think, really lies on the politicians and the government running Lebanon right now.
Well, I don't know. I think, to be honest, I don't think. I think maybe Lebanese officials, some of them are slightly more to blame, but I don't think it's by much compared to the people because I think, I just think Lebanese political settlement is it doesn't allow for an effective government. It allows for three very weak factions fighting. It doesn't allow for a strong government, so you can't expect much from the government either. I agree, people are, they shouldn't
That
be
is so true. So I
blamed.
mean, what would you expect of such a system?
Yeah, exactly. But the thing again is, I think people are, again, people should also take some responsibility for, especially when there are free elections, and they still
Well, free
elect corrupt
elections to what
politicians, and they,
extent, and between who, and in what circumstances, and what information, and
I'm sorry, but in this day and age, if you can't, anyways, that's my point. But what the other thing I was going so what do you think of a lot of people in Western media and in Iran, a lot of places, they blame Hezbollah. They say that Hezbollah's ineffective mismanagement and blah blah, and the fact that because of them there are sanctions. That's the main reason why Lebanon is in its situation right. Yeah, what do you think? Do
I
you
mean,
think
yeah,
Hezbollah bears is more of
sanctions never help. Of course, I think most of the time they make the situation worse for the people from that country. And Hezbollah is one part of the government, as you've been saying. of course it falls on them, but also the other parties and also the external forces that there might be a million things wrong with Hezbollah, but just like in any other area, their criticisms are often not genuine. You know, there's a million things that you could say about Trump, but they go and find the weirdest things and try to impeach him on something small, and they're unable to. Why? Because everything else can come back to them as well. You can be like, okay, don't you do the same thing? So I think it's the same story here, really.
Makes sense. No, I agree. I largely agree. Although I would say I think if you look at the protests in Lebanon, most of the protests seem to be aimed at mismanagement of economy and corruption, and they seem to be targeting everybody, not just Hezbollah or Sunnis or Christians or anybody. So I do think it's probably a bigger issue. Um, yeah, but it was a sad event that further pushed the country into a chaos.